What's the role that you have?
I put continue to actively create processes to improve financials and other accounting-related activities.
So, what's the role?
The role is a controller for property management company.
Okay, so then read that again now that I have that context.
Actively create processes to improve financials and financials production and other areas of accounting.
Perfect. Create process. Beautiful. I know what kind of brain's going to do that. Needs to do that. Great. What's one more?
I put respond to board members' requests, which I guess is not specific.
In what ways?
Email and in-person going to board meetings, stuff like that.
Okay, so attends board meetings, explains reports, closes the books. Do you see the level of whatever the details are?
Yeah.
We'll get, now we have an idea of what most controllers types might be,
Yeah.
but the idea is it different for you? See, the reason why we have this here, in a minute we're going to see, this gives you the uniqueness of the way you do the job. The challenge sometimes with your assessment tools is that they use some general understandings of how people or whatever a job is. And you need yours to be really specific. Your controller may make presentations all the time. May. Some other controllers would never do that. They're always behind the scenes. Well, if they're going to be really visible, they present to clients, to future investors, that's a really different brain than the one who just cranks out the numbers.
We're having trouble with the technician versus like the manager.
Exactly.
We're in the middle of that problem.
That's right. So it's up to you to define what is it for you so you can then create the profile of someone who can do your version of it. And that's been a big problem as we go with the generics. I talk to companies all the time when we help them with this, and they start by going to the internet, taking somebody else's job definition and saying, I guess that's what we do. How is that what you do? So the challenge is, could you help them start at the beginning of the day, end at the end of the day for whichever one, just so you can see what is your version of it. And once you see it all listed out, then stand on high and look at it and say, is that really what this job does? What am I missing? Or where are the three big buckets of things? There's a lot of responsibilities under it. Closing the books or ensuring financial integrity. Got it. What are all those things? Then presenting results. What are all those things? Then and managing and engaging staff. What are all those things? And then when you have that, now you know the profile of someone, of the things they need to do, so you can be real intentional about where would I find that, how would I define it, where would I find it, and how will I ensure the things that are most important they can do for me. Does that make sense? How is that compared to what you're currently doing?
Much better.
Well, I'm hoping not, but you know, that your current process doesn't spend the time customizing with clarity who the specific things this job does so I can do the next point, which is really important, which is how does it think?
This makes you so much more efficient as an organization.
That's what I'm after. It's certainly about being effective, but could it also be efficient? How many of you love the hiring side? Right. Most people are like, oh, shoot me. But that doesn't mean that you can't be remarkable, or you shouldn't be, or you have to be remarkable at it. Every part of this you have to be remarkable. Why? It's talent. What does talent do for you? It's a real question. Make money.
You're also setting the expectation before they're even working from you of how our company operates and our structure and who we are.
Really good comment, Jeff. Everything here, you are creating an impression about what the rest of this is going to be like. So all of this needs to be intentional. I know what I need. I send out to the world this really wisely crafted message about who I am, what we do, why it's important, and why this is valuable. Why? Because I don't want junk. I don't mean junk meaning terrible people. I certainly don't want that either. But junk meaning I don't want people who don't fit this. Remember, this whole section we're working on today is about alignment. Right people, right role. I don't know what the role is. I can't possibly find the right people. And in that, if I know that if I don't have the right people, they will be disengaged. If they're disengaged, they won't be remarkable with my customers, and I won't grow my business. So I had to show you that whole model, knowing that sometimes if you're not in charge and you're an HR person and you start fighting back about some things you need in order to hire well, the higher levels sometimes for you will fight back saying, no, just hire somebody. So what do you say? No, we don't hire somebody. We hire the body, the right one. I know what it looks like. All the right stuff. Isn't that what we're talking about today? So I was waiting to do that. It's my fourth meeting and I finally said that. So what I wanted to do is, do you have a pretty clear idea of what that looks like? I don't want to move past this one if you're not okay with it. Pretty clear with that? Here's what I really want to share with you. We're going to start this and we're going to take a break as we move through it. So what's the brain of the job that's going to do, what's the brain of the person who's going to do the job you just defined? That's the most critical part. So how do you currently now think about behaviors in your process? Margot, when you're in the recruiting side of it, what profiling do you do to understand how to go out on, particularly on the behavioral side? What information are you gathering?
We do have core values that we stand by, that we actually ask questions around those core values, and we can kind of probe once they respond to dig a little deeper. We have assessments as well.
How about behaviors related to the tasks of the job? What do you currently use or do instead of just looking at skill and experience, but the behavior piece? Is there something that you currently do?
Well, we do have the assessments that tie
Well,
to
the core
that.
values are really mostly all behavioral.
Yes, that's
When
true.
we ask questions about our core values, it's about their behaviors and how they're
Like one's dedicated.
how they're going to behave at work.
And can you give me an example of a time you went above and beyond your job responsibilities to satisfy a customer?
Great, this is really important because the behaviors about your core values are going to be different than the behaviors to pull the job off. They have to pull the job off with those behaviors in the company, but being methodical may not be a core value, but it's a critical behavior for this job. That's what I'm after. How do you know where that is? So I want to share with you, so how do you define the behaviors? This is really just my phrase, is what's the brain of the job? So I want to show you a way of thinking about it, and what I want to do is challenge what you currently do. If you have something great, I just want you to have something in this space. If you don't, then think about something like this. So do me a favor, flip to page 2, worksheet 2. So just next page over, we're going to move back onto page 1 in a minute. See that grid on the bottom? Yeah.
Does this profile count in this realm?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what we do.
This is not disk. I'm going to show you, if you've done disk, it will lay out similarly. This is not. There are some things about it that disk won't do. This is why we had to build this. But what I want to share with you is where on the grid is your job. Everybody is on, all human behavior is on here someplace. You're on here someplace. Your job is on here someplace, and that's what we want. If you knew where on that grid your job was, then when you took the assessment that goes with it, you would lay right on top of you on that same, on where your job is. You each use the same language, and I want to show you how to do that. But first, understand what human behavior is. And to Frank's comment before, everything about this is really about a linguistics exercise. We're just using words to describe human behavior. Everybody on the, so these axes are important. There it is. How you make decisions is on this horizontal axis. People on the right-hand side, these 8 personalities or core areas, use data and information to make a decision. People on the left-hand side use feelings and emotions and relationships in order to make decisions. One isn't right or wrong, there's not good or bad, but there's productive or unproductive based on what your job needs. You are where you are, but if you're over here and the job's over here, what are you going to do? Struggle. So we need to know where on here the job is so we can then say, that's the type of person I need. And now that I know what the words are for it, I can go out and tell the world what I'm looking for. Methodical, analytical, driven, competitive, whatever the words are. And I want to help you with that. On the top, so this vertical axis is how you work with others. So on the top refers to people who are more directing. They push themselves, they push others, and generally solo performers. Not generally, but can be. And people on the bottom of the grid, look at the words, relator, peacemaker, facilitator, includer. These are collaborators. It's not right or wrong, not good or bad. You are where you are. Where is this job, though? Because what you don't want to do is hire somebody in a space that's in a space different than where the job is. So the easiest way to just get the concept of this is to practice. If you were hiring for a crew chief or a store manager or a site manager, would you want that person to be more thinking or feeling?
A little more thinking than feeling, maybe?
Would you want that job to be more directing than supporting, mentoring or supporting? So the brain that will probably pull off an independent, run the location, run the site, is probably going to be more here than over here. Do I need a peacemaker or a listener or a caregiver? I might need some aspect of it, but if this is where they are all the time, what will they do? Struggle. This is get it done, push, get it, talk, negotiate, do all these things. It doesn't come easy to these people. They have some remarkable abilities in other roles, not this one. Just because they may have done that role before and they're over here doesn't mean they're what you need. So if you look at skill and experience and say, wow, 20 years of experience, I bet they're great. Maybe they're not. They don't even think the right way. Their flashlight goes here, the job's flashlight goes here. All day long you will micromanage them or wonder why they have yet to meet the deadlines or make the results happen. They're hardwired in really particular ways. They can make some modification. Most of the time, they're using their flashlight based on following their hardwired responses, go in a particular direction. Is it in line with the way you go? Here's another one. Purchasing or accounting. Is it more thinking or feeling? Is it more directing or supporting? Absolutely. So in most cases, though you may craft a job where it's different, and I'll show you that in a minute, most cases they're here. What happens if you have this really assertive and aggressive and competitive accountant? Mistakes.
Yeah, the work doesn't get done.
The work doesn't get done. So if you have this social side here, look, this is why accountants are always accused of not being very social, because they're big, intellectual, methodical, process type people. So a fun time for them, if you have to choose the party planner, are you going to choose this one or are you going to choose this one? Most of the time. But anyway, do you see that you are where you are? The idea is, what does the job need in order to be really effective? One last one here. Sales, conventional sales. Is it more thinking or feeling?
Kind of the middle.
Yeah, in most cases it's relationship based. And is it more directing or supporting? More solo performance or collaborative? Yeah, so here's old conventional sales, okay? So I have a brother who's a salesman. He's over here. He sells chemicals. He just is there to make sure his clients don't die. So it's really important that he's about the details. So based on that, what I want for you is just to see where these things look so that you can start to figure out, where do I belong? So what I want to do is show you how do you figure out where it is for the job. I'm going to give you some time. We'll build a break into that. We'll come back and finish this section off. Here's how you do it. So now look at all the words above that image on page 2 on worksheet 2. These are the words that describe the positions around the grid. So leader means decisive, determined, direct, commanding, and assertive. That's why I said it's a linguistics exercise. These are 80 of the core human performance words, arranged in a way that builds a profile about who they are and how they think. So these words go from more directing to more thinking, from more thinking to more supporting, back up to more directing in a different way. Frank.
Okay, I know you have an assessment tool which actually creates this graph. So they don't literally, you don't literally go through it. You may go through and sort of the words that you want, but then when the individual takes the test derives those attributes and applies it to the chart. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. So
What is your test called?
the test is called the Talent and Performance Style Assessment. It's on our website. It's $25. The reason why, in fact, two things about that. One is, if you just want to practice with it, just send me an email. You have my card, and I'll send you a code. Go see what you think about it. The other thing is, the reason why we list these words out is so you can use the same words we use on the personal assessment, so you know where you are on the grid, but it uses the exact same nomenclature so you can use that to determine where the job is on the grid. So you now have the ability to compare apples to apples. This is the one problem we had with all of those other great assessments that are out there, is they don't share this. I don't know what you're thinking. So when I run through your assessment, I don't know what tools or words you use for me to then use your tool to see where my job is in your tool. So I just get your results about my candidate without having any idea where that candidate is in relation to my job. This was the one thing that nobody else was doing, which is why we put it there, because you need this. You have to see where your job is, and wherever your job is, the process you use to get it has to be the same process you evaluate your candidates with, so you can compare one to the other. So, how do you determine where your job is? You simply go through and circle any of these words that would allow the tasks that you listed to happen successfully. So when I went through the task that I listed for that job of an operations administrator, I simply went through and highlighted any of those performance adjectives that would drive success, and this is what I came up with. Now you see where the 5s and the 4s came with. So if all 5 of them, that's something I absolutely have to have. That was one of my gotta-haves. The 4s were preferred but not required. When I do that, it laid itself out on the grid like that. I now see where on the grid that is. So that when a candidate now takes the assessment, I can compare these exact 4 talents against their scores, and I'll show you that in a minute, to know whether they move on from a behavioral standpoint. And now I know, are they close? Does their brain work in the way the job's brain works? So on page 2 are all of those words. All you need to do, so that's what I'd like you to do now, we're going to build a break in while we do this. Think about the job you started to build on page 1A. That's just why we needed the details for you to practice. What is it this job does in great detail? Because if it's not in great detail, how do you know which words will then drive success in it? 2 things to know about these words. One is it will create for you the place on the grid where your job is. Now you know what the right answer is. The second thing it does is it gives you practical, everyday behavioral adjectives that you will go out and put in your job ad. You'll put it or use it in your sourcing strategy, and you will test for these words in your interview. So if you identify that they need to be results-focused, action-oriented, and take charge, my interview has to prove that they have those. But I know what I'm looking for. And the reason why I circled those words is that I looked at what the job did, and I identified this is, in fact, the words that will help those things happen. So here's what I need you to do. Read through those list of words. Circle any of the words based on the task that you identified for the job. Which words would help make it happen? Do that and let the profile fall out of what it is that you're looking for. Plot it on the grid. Identify 2 talents that you think are gotta-haves and 2 talents that you think would be nice to have, the way I've done it here. And it came from how many words you circled in any one line. First, are you clear? Those are a whole lot of words. Let me just make sure you're clear. Will?
Well, one question is, like, a lot of these are obvious, then there's like respectful, like, you're gonna circle respectful almost every single time. How do you draw the line?
So you may say respectful is one of my core values as an organization. So in every profile I do, I always circle it. If there's enough of them along here, then that becomes one you'll watch for.
Gotcha.
If it's a core one that you think has to be in all of them, highlight that and say, I'm going to put that in my ad all the time because it's about my values. But what we're looking for first is the profile of the attributes needed to do the job. Look for that first, and then we'll add the ones about the organization. Does that make sense? Margot, I was watching you, looked a little confused. Are you good on?
I was thinking-
Okay.
I was sorry,
Okay.
just trying to think
I just
of-
want to make sure if you're struggling, I just want to catch you. So we've had a little over an hour together already. Thank you. So of all the things we've talked about, what's something that's really stuck in your mind? Something new, something confirmed, something you already believed or knew? What's something that you're remembering so far of any of the things we talked about? We did a review already, and we started talking about a performance profile. Any of that, what's something that's in your mind? Will?
Getting more granular on the activity detail instead of like,
Broad
actually
brush.
know what they're gonna do. Yes, that's
Yeah,
broad brush.
yeah. Anything else? What else?
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, I have an idea in my mind what the job is and the description, but sometimes when you're not detailing that as specifically as you should to potential candidates, that they fully understand what they're getting into.
Yeah, and whether they in fact know it and have all the abilities to make it happen. Joyce, something that's resonating for you?
This is what we're about to go into now, about these talent. That's really granular to me, is looking at that based on those different areas in the chart. I mean, it's similar to things I've seen, but this just, to me, is just very specific.
Yeah.
It's very useful.
Sue, how about something for you? What's
I don't know if it's,
my mind is a little jumbled right now, but, you know, one of the things is nobody is really sitting down with me and understanding what I do. So I'm kind of wondering if within my organization, how much of that is going on? Or is there's, you know, so that's what's going through my mind right now.
So I'm going to save that until we get to it at the end of this. But that's a really good point about understanding your own trajectory, and think about this as a development tool in addition to a hiring tool. All right, so the clarity about what any role does and the future steps of what other roles are, could you in fact see what are the places that work really well and don't work so well about you and your job? So in a minute I'm going to show you and ask you, where do you think you are on this? And so you can send me an email, I'll send it to you. Go see where you are on this. What are your words? And I'll show you what your report will look like to see where your strengths are. And I'm not going to call them weaknesses, because they're not. They're liabilities. They're the other side of your strength. If you're really strong in something, it naturally means you're not amazing at the other thing. I don't care what your parents said to you. You're not amazing at everything. And so there are some things that are not your thing, but they need you to manage it. It's not a weakness. You won't fix it. There's not one day you wake up, you go to bed empathetic and supportive, the next day you wake up competitive and driven. That's not the way it works. So what you may need to do is manage that, and based on that, but you can't manage it if you don't know. What I wanted for you was to see what I think to be an easy way of developing the brain of the job, so you can visually see it as well as know the practical words you will tell the world in your ad and in your sourcing strategy, and what you will test for in your interview. Does that make sense? I will tell you, because we learned about what works and what doesn't work, when we first launched this out, we made people memorize definitions of these. That was a total what's not working.
Yeah.
Instead, now we give you the words, and it's so much easier for you just to circle on the word and say, oh, I totally get that that's what he means by leader or driver. Here are the words. These are the words that really matter. The only reason why they have these 16 placeholders is so you lock it in someplace so you can see the visual. When we train organizations to do this, the last thing we leave them is a 4x6 frame with a picture of that they can put on their desk. So that when they're talking to somebody in an interview, they know exactly where these people are. You get to know the grid so well. Based on their responses, I know where they are. And if I know where my job is, I got this. Are they close enough to keep going, or is this interview over? Does that make sense? So what I'd like to have you do is finish that up if you haven't, and identify two of the talents that you think are 5s, meaning they're most important based on your definition of what the job is, and 2 that are 4. We've been doing this for a long time. Our guidance is you don't need any more than 4 talents in it. Generally, the 5s, if they're 5s means got to have, you don't really need any more than 2 that are absolutes, because I bet 70% of the job is down to 3 or 4 major buckets of things. I bet that's what it is. What are the talents that drive those? So take a look at that, and then based on what you find, go back to page 1A, the page just ahead of it, and put your 4 talents in. Let's see if we can finish building out your profile today. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. This is for you. How do you think you could do this with your team?
The reason I laugh is because working with the larger HR department, because they want to standardize a lot of things. So taking something like this, you're asking whether you think you do a lot.
I am.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
But as a business, as a department, and or
Right.
but getting to do it across the horizon landscape.
So the question I was asking too is, how would you involve your team to come up with the behavioral piece? So give me some ideas on how. So I made you look at the role today and circle some words. What are some other ways you can do that?
Do what?
Identify the profile, the behavioral profile of the job. What are some other ways? So I had you fill this out today. So what are some other ways of gathering the information? You filled it out. What else could you do?
Let your staff do it for themselves
Yeah.
and for the job that's open.
That's it. Take your best performer, have them take the assessment. I know have a profile. Have 2 or 3 of my people go through this and see what they come up with and then negotiate where I think the profile is. Today it's you. You know, I'm throwing all this on you, but it doesn't have to be, because the collective perspective would be important. But many times the reason why a really meaningful approach is have your best or best performers take this is that there frequently is an outlier in a behavioral profile that you'd never thought of. But that's the reason why they're so good. So think about this job for a minute. This is an operations administrator. So they have to be really direct and really specific and really detailed. But if they're like that all the time, they're not so good with people. So the relator behaviors, supportive, cooperative, diplomatic, respectful, are important to take the severity of this profile and slide it down a little bit. So an outlier pulls it in another direction. What's the likelihood you'll find someone who's this and that? What's the likelihood you'll find someone who has these attributes?
The 3 or all 4?
These 3 like clustered like this and one over here.
It's harder.
Yeah.
It may be. You don't know. There's 7 billion people on the planet. So, but at least you now know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And that's the part. So if you said that's a 5, then you're going to hold on to it. If you said that's a 4, and you said driver, solver, in this case, driver and solver are my gotta-haves, those are in my interview, then bottom line and relator, I might ask a question or check on, but you know, it's not a deal breaker. I may be more interested in asking whether any of this exists just to see if they're going to be a little bit human related and not really pushy and driven, because that might be a deal breaker. But it gives us the ability to be really intentional about what we're looking for and what we're going to include in our interview. Do you see, just by doing that, we now have so much more information about how to go ahead and tell the world what we need, but the big part will be, how do I prove that they have the things that I need? But if I'm not clear about what it is, then I'm looking for someone who's results focused and take charge. Those are really easy words to prove. I need to see somebody prove that to me, not just ask questions about it. I now know. How did I know it? I defined my job and I use this to give me practical words about where the behavior is. Let me show you what it looks like. So the goal of this was to, could we create the job on the grid? So the grid's our centerpiece, all right? I got the job on the grid. Then my question is, where are you on the grid? When you take the assessment, this is the report. There's an automatic report that comes off the system. It's short. This is the long report that we send because this is a hiring report. Here are the descending order in score of all 16 talents. So I know what my high ones are. I know what my low ones are. The bolded black words were their strongest words in their greatest talents. I now know their strengths. The bolded red words are the least like them in their weakest areas. These are what we call their liabilities. And they're liabilities because the opposite is happening. So the opposite of driver is peacemaker. The opposite of driver is peacemaker. So if I'm really strong up here, I imagine I'm not that strong over here. So in a conversation that, that we had on the break was, why is it that your organization is always trying to fix somebody's weaknesses? It's not a weakness. The fact that you're so strong up here means you are not that good up here on this section. So there's nothing you can do to fix it. What you can do is create awareness around it and manage it. So why would you promote somebody or hire somebody if this is where they are compared to what you need, which is up here? So when we talk about hiring for strengths or using strengths, we are after what the words are. I use this with every one of my coaching clients because I want the snapshot of who they are on the inside. This is who you really are. Based on that, now I know when, as a coach, I want to lead you into things that need these, and when these show up, I want to be aware that it's going to take more effort on your part to handle them. What if you had all day long part of your job that required this? You would hate it after a while. And I bet you're not that good at it. And now we understand why 70% of employees are in some form of disengagement. It's this. So think for a minute on that grid, where do you think you are? Just imagine where you are. I'm trying to think of the best picture to show you. Let me go back here. All right. There. Just imagine where you think you are. What quadrant do you think you are? Are you more thinking or feeling, more directing or supporting? You have the opportunity to take it, do be wherever you are. Just as the first round, take a look at it. And then I'm going to move you back to this page 2 with all the words. This is really, so today, right now, you could probably figure it out. Just go and circle where you think your words are. You could do that. Now, the online assessment doesn't lay the words out like this. Then the results would be contrived. It's built in an algorithm where you can't see where it is, so it tabulates their process as they go through it and then gives a result at the end. I'm just sharing where it is by its structure so you can lay out your job on it. Same words, organized differently in the online assessment. So you can independently get their view and create this view. You have both. So if you have a system that uses an assessment, I love that you do. Ensure that you have some way of taking the assessment results and comparing it in a meaningful way to the expectation of what you have for where it should be. We didn't find it anywhere, which is why we built this. This is the one thing that I think is different. I want to show you this one more thing, and then we'll move on. So if this is the report they get, here are the bolded words that are their highest scores, and now because we use the same language, we can take the profile that we already built and we add it right on top. There are the yellow ones. So now I know that 3 of the 4 things I need are in their top. But now I start this question. Hey, wait a minute, one thing I need is lower than their top. Is it too low for me to discount them? Wait, not done. They have a couple of talents that are bigger, different than the ones I want them to have. Are they too strong to a point where they may undo what I need, and I don't want that here? But now I know. So now if I have this information, I know what to check in on in my interview. I want to make sure that's not too low and these are not too high. I got this. But most of the time, it looks like they're pretty good. You know what? They should be part of my face-to-face interview. And we'll talk about that when we get to interviewing on where you would use an assessment.
You know, that's not in the handout, is it?
This is not in the handouts. Yeah, I chose last minute on whether to show this. Sometimes based on time, I do or I don't. But the reason why it's here is to show you what, when you take the assessment, you get a report different than this, but when I see your name show up in it, I will make this report for you so you can see you. This is the problem. If we give this to everybody, the first thing they do is they go right down here. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. Everybody has told you you have weaknesses you have to fix. No, you have strength you need to use. Go here, develop a response back here when it shows up, but go up here more often. We do this with high school and college kids all the time. Where are you strong? Where in today's world needs what you're strong at? Put those two together and go be there. And that's the same thing that's going on in the job. Where are you strong? Where does the job need you to be strong? Bring someone in with that brain. Don't try and squeeze somebody into it. Find one who has that. Does that make sense? That was in my head. I just want to make sure it's moving through. All right. So you put 4 behaviors down on page 1. Great. Let's finish this thing off. Hard skills, soft skills, education and experience. What's a hard skill?
Like technical,
Office, Excel, we can.
yeah.
Right. So that's
You need
examples
to
of the
measure.
but something learned. Okay. So you go to school for something, you learn it. You can develop proficiency in it. You can measure its level of achievement. Those are hard skills. So what's a soft skill?
Personality and.
Brilliant. Yeah, the HR side, the human interaction side. Flip one more page. Sorry, I told you it's an information-rich program. The next page, 3D, is a list of soft skills. The reason why we put it in there, it's a hot button now in the workplace. So it's a list of the major soft skills under professionalism, critical thinking, problem solving, creative thinking, leadership, those kinds of things. Another way to think about soft skills is they're the lubricant that makes the hard skills work. The challenge is the younger generations have not had a lot of education in the soft skills side. So if you put soft skills down in your requirement and give them a 5, meaning it's required, you may be disappointed that some of this next generation, that's the one critique. I'm not for or against any generation. There's wonderful boomers and lousy boomers. There's wonderful millennials and lousy millennials. Broad brush is not the way to do it. But a comment about the millennial and the iGens, the generation coming after them, the I, like iPhone, iGens. They have not had really significant soft skills. They didn't get it at home, they didn't get it at school. At home because we had hovering parents, and at school because there was the expectation that they learned it at home, so they didn't put it in. So they show up in the workplace and they're not good at professionalism, shaking hands, branding statements, networking. Those kinds of things are remiss. So the reason why I mention that, for two things. One is your organization. If you have any kind of education in your organization, a thing you may want to consider is the soft skill is a big part that more and more organizations are owning. Since they didn't come with it and they need it, we're going to have to give it to them. So be aware as you identify hard skills and soft skills that if you give it a 5 just in this process, means you're going to have to hold out for it. Maybe a soft skill might be 4s, depending on. I'm not telling you it has to be, but just be aware. Let me ask you real quick about education and experience. Education, if you need it, that's fine. What about experience? Does experience matter?
I think so.
Depending on the position.
And I'm fine with that. What I don't want you to do is default into an industrial age mindset that says we always check for experience.
But not-
5 years of this, 3 years of this.
But some experience.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, like, it doesn't have to be exactly what, but just something.
So how will you define it? Based on what the job does and what you need, rather than default that I must always ask for it. So let me give you this one story I tell all the time, but I can't not tell it. So I was out at a restaurant with the kids. I have 3 daughters, and my kids and I were out just at one of these chain restaurants. And so we sit down at a booth, and a waitress comes over, and I say to her, "Hey, before you start, I just want to let you know I have some food allergies." And she goes, "Okay, scoot over." So I slide in my bench. She sits next to me. Which, already, okay, fine, this is great, personal, maybe she's got this right. She says this, she says, "You know this food allergy thing? I think that's the way people just change the menu." I'm like, "No, I have EpiPen. This is for real." So she said, "I've been a waitress for 25 years. I hate it when people change the menu. If you can't eat the food that we serve here, then maybe you shouldn't eat here." Now you know why I tell this story all the time.
Does this make you want to tell, back to your original story, tell people to go eat there?
Yes, yes. So I said, "Okay, kids, take your stuff, we're going." But the point is, from an experience standpoint, I bet she looked amazing. But from a behavioral standpoint, not a fit. So don't get hoodwinked into thinking that experience is all that. It was when the work we did was task-related. But in a knowledge-based workplace, it's your brain you're paying for. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't have it. It just means be intentional about what you ask for. So I want you to be discerning in this process. So spend just a minute. Let's finish off the profile. What skills would you require of this job? Then give them a 5 or a 4. What education and experience would you require of this role that you're working on? Give it a 5 or a 4, but be discerning about it. Knowing that this entire profile you would work on with the people who actually do the job, but today we're just practicing. Is that okay? Well. So I don't normally spend a lot of time on this section because hard skills, soft skills were hard skills, it was skill in education, and experience skills and experience. We're pretty comfortable. We've been doing it for years. That's been the way we hired in the industrial age. The behavior piece was the piece I really wanted to spend all the time on. What I wanted you to see as much as possible in the little time that we have, not leaving you on your own too much because I wanted you to talk about it too, is what does a profile look like? And could it give you a far better way of getting your arms around exactly what it is that this job does and the attributes that would lead to success? That's really all that the steps that we just did. The behavior, hard skill, soft skill, education, experience pieces are, this is what it takes to do this work. Now you know why this work was so important. So this is truly your starting point. That's the linchpin in this whole thing. Could you burst it out in enough detail to be really clear about what it is that you need so this can happen in your company? And so we'll have an opportunity, in fact, you brought up a really good point, Will, when you brought up some of the behaviors that are really part of your organization's values, and that we will also ask about those as well. But it may not be enough in order to create the whole line of what I need for doing the job, but there are some behaviors that I need so they will fit into the way we do work. Absolutely. So the goal was to create that, or just practice with it today, so we can, stop and notice what you do in the way that you define. This is the only section we're in so far is defining. So we can take a look at what it is. But here's my question. So if you have this clarity of what the job does and the profile on any job, every job, what else could you do with it?
Help coach.
Coach is a big one. So imagine if you knew your employee's profile and you had this information on every job. So I could certainly coach by looking at whether you're engaged and disengaged. Is it the misalignment here? Is there something missing here or not right here? What else could I do if I had an employee's profile and I had a job profile, bless you, on each one of the jobs? What's the other thing I could do with it?
You could develop them, make sure they're in the right position.
That's right.
Move
So
around.
yeah, this moving around. So it may also, so think of it as a puzzle piece, right? So if I'm looking at my employees engaged and disengaged, pick my disengaged employees and say, let me see the profile and let me see what's available. That one little shift may take the disengaged employee and turn them into a more engaged employee because there's some misalignment where they are. But if I address that misalignment with some coaching, then I might be able to shift them up. Maybe from disengaged to engaged, maybe even, to your point, Scott, from before, maybe even one of the actively disengaged might move at least up to disengaged. Now that doesn't mean I want to keep them there, but in today, whenever I have an actively disengaged employee, I know that they are pulling against everything trying to go forward. I've got to cut the rope or move them in. One little adjustment might be enough to do it. So you can see why it's so important as a coach, why I have that information, because whatever somebody's trying to work on, I need to know where they are, where their default strengths are, and where they will struggle, and have they placed themselves by accident in areas where they're struggling. That's probably why they came to see me. So that process then helps me with the information. So I wanted to show it to you as a means not just to bring in the right talent, but the movement of talent around. So that the second part, which is critical, on engaging and retaining, is so much easier when you have all the facts in front of you about why, what's moving people into where, and how I might be able to make some choices. Everybody clear with that? So that's the define section. We have define, source, and interview as our three sections today. What are your questions about defining? Saw performance profile, saw a talent grid, saw a behavioral profile with all the words, saw a structured format, process, the first step in the process. All of that's come in the first one. It's a lot there, I know, but we just put it in one bucket, and we'll look at two other buckets with unique tools in each. Which of these tools matter most? What are the things that are not working for you today when you came in that you want to find some solution to? Trying to give you as many things as possible. So as many of these what's not working things move on to the what's working, or at least you have the mechanism to make it happen. Are we okay to move on? Okay, sourcing. So do me a favor. Turn to the person to your right or left, and I have two questions for you. Find out from them one conventional way that they source and one unconventional way that they source that's working. And if you have three, then 3 is fine. 2, 4, 6, you're good here. So if the three of you, 2, 4, 6. Oh, right, so sorry, I guess it's, sorry Jenny, I kind of drew in on that. All right. So all I want is share with each other one conventional way you were sourcing that's working, and one what you would consider to be unconventional and it's working.